Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quake Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the mighty rat horde, the Skaven, against the forces of Khemri on the map Waldenhof. So, one of the big problems the Tomb Kings have right now is dealing with artillery pieces, because unlike the vampire counts, they obviously cannot summon zombies on top of their enemy troops. They don't have any rat summons or anything like that, so they really struggle to shut down artillery pieces. One of their biggest strengths is also just their large units. They'll almost always bring monsters. They'll bring their lords are almost always mounted on some sort of large mount, even if it's just a horse. And oftentimes, of course, you'll see necrosphinxes, big chariots, and all the other sorts of beasties. Tomb scorpions are of course popular. You'll see sepulchral stalkers, all that sort of stuff. So with Skaven, of course, you have some great shutdowns for that with the Warp Lightning Cannon. So the core of this army that I built here is 2 units of Warp Lightning Cannons. These guys, of course, are deadly accurate. They do ridiculous amounts of damage, and they have an actual bonus versus large of 70. As you can see here, I'm immediately teeing off on High Queen Khalida. I have veteraned up my cannons up as much as possible, up to 9 ranks of veterancy, though as you can see they're whiffing quite a bit here against High Queen Khalida. But with high veterancy, they'll be able to shoot much faster. If we check their reload rate, we can see that it's down to 15.5 seconds rather than what I do believe is roughly 20 normally, and they also have much better accuracy. And the impact on accuracy that chevrons have for artillery should never be understated. It's one of those things I think people don't realize, but if you do some testing, it's the difference is huge. In my opinion, probably the biggest game changer chevrons can be. The rest of my army here is pretty standard. I do have Lord Skrulk as making up the core here. He only came with utility spells. I didn't bring damage because I thought that my opponent would bring a bunch of monsters to break me with fear and terror. Unfortunately for me, that was not the case. So I do, however, have Blessed with Filth, Wither to debuff enemy armor on monsters, with Vermintide to spawn clan rats on top of archers or Ushabti, and then of course the usual stand your ground, Rod of Corruption, and the Liber Bubonicus to try and nuke down enemy lords even further. Alongside him, I do have an assassin. Of course, the assassin is actually very well kitted out. I've brought most of his items on him. I do have trophy heads, concealment bombs, Skaven brew, and rival high talisman, which is a great little melee attack debuff, as well as slippery. One of the nice things about the assassin is that he's just so very good at debuffing enemy single targets, making them easier to kill. As you can tell from this composition, I was very, very worried about the monsters on the Khemri roster, much less so than their infantry, which is pretty crappy, to be honest. In the back here, we do have a single unit of Poison Wind Globadiers. Once again, armor piercing, anti-large. These guys are oriented at killing monsters. You can see another volley does go into High Queen Khalida, though you can see the shells are kind of whiffing, the little death lasers. We have knocked her down by about a quarter of her HP, though, which is pretty good. My front line is composed of a mix of clan rats with spears to ward off enemy large even further, as well as plague monks to shred through the cheapo depot enemy infantry. Not anticipating this sort of infantry spam from my opponent, as you can see, he actually outnumbers me. I definitely kind of underestimated or misjudged what my opponent would do here, so the Plague Monks will be very crucial here to crushing the enemy in front line. On the flanks here, we have more Clan Rat Spears, just kind of doing some tactical geometry to defend my back line, and then finally 2 units of Stormwind Halberds in case my opponent does try to plow through on top of my Warp Lightning Cannon with monsters, which, as you can see, we simply didn't bring. For my opponent, he went incredibly spammy, and this has definitely caught me by surprise, and I think it's actually a pretty viable composition against Skaven. Well, of course, he does have the High Queen Khalida, who's already been forced away by the Warp Lightning Cannons. She does have a pretty nice selection of abilities. Sorry, not spells. My will be done, a nice little melee attack, melee defense buff. The Curse, which is a great AoE damage ability that goes off when she gets below 50% HP, to which she's already pretty close. Venom Wave, which is a little knockback that disrupts enemies and allows her to escape a little more effectively. My opponent also did bring a Lich Priest of Neakara, of course, to spam those spells, as well as to heal his troops, because, of course, the little ability here, the Restless Dead, does provide a slight healing as well as resurrection buff every time you cast with your Lord Neakara. He did bring Usef's Incantation of Desiccation to debuff my troops. Curse of Zar is simply his built-in curse, and then Nephara's Scrolls of Mighty Incantation. So definitely kind of gambling on a single spell, which I think is a little bit of a mistake, but we'll see how things pay off. Unfortunately, though, you can see the Lich Priest of Neakara is having a dreadful day as the crossfire from the cannons plows into him. 3 shots there, hitting him back to back, and he's already down by a huge amount of HP. You can see he's already down to about half health, perhaps less. For my opponent's front line, is composed entirely of Tomb Guard Halberds. These guys are very, very potent. They're not the best against infantry, but with their monsters' melee defense, even the Plague Monks will struggle to cut through them. They do have silver shields, so had I brought a bunch of slingers, they'd be very tanky against that. And they are going to be able to screen away, say, Rat Ogres or Doom Wheels or Hell Pit Abominations fairly effectively. In the back, of course, my opponent does have a whole bunch of skeleton archers, 4 units of them, of which one is the Blessed Legion of Focht, which is armor summoning. I think this is a bit unnecessary against Skaven, since Skaven don't really have much in the way of armor to begin with. But perhaps my opponent brought them for the range, and just the fact that they are veteraned up, so a little more accurate. You can see the Lich Priest of Nekar is on the verge of wavering here and falling apart. He is trying to get extra winds of magic, but it's really not going to help him very much, because at the moment, he's getting nuked down by the artillery pieces. On the flanks, my opponent does have 2 units of Nekar and warriors, who can of course shred my infantry. They're not quite a match for Plague Monks, but there is a lot of them, and they will be able to shred through my Clarinet Spears pretty effectively. You can see my Plague Monks here taking some withering fire from the archers, though it's not exactly focused, and another volley from the cannons knocks the Lich Priest of Nekar down to the point that he's crumbling. In the back, my opponent does have a whole bunch of skeleton horsemen, simply to overwhelm my backline, but these guys are very low quality. They won't really be able to go up against Clarinet Spears, much less against the Stormvermin Halberds, and they're definitely not the best of units there. You can see over here, finally, he crumbles, the poor Nekarn caster. And in the meantime, I am starting to simply lob Poison Wind Globes into the Tomb Guard. Queen Khalida just tried to push in and immediately loses over half of her HP and is just tanking. She's falling apart very quickly. She's trying to juke, you can see, trying to avoid the cannon fire, and it's really just not working. I do pop Maraud of Corruption to try to melt down the central unit from Tomb Guard. You can see High Queen Khalida does take a withering barrage there and is going to get nuked down to the afterlife. Over here, the Clanrats have gotten on top of the poor skeleton archers. Then they're shredding them. They're doing a decent job there. Over here in the front line, the Plague Monks are tearing through the Tomb Guard. Though you can see with the heals going off, my opponent is definitely kind of recovering a little bit here and there. Over here, my Clarinet Spears did route from the center. I was a little late in casting some of my buffs and debuffs and getting my assassin in there. My opponent does get his Nekar and Horseman on top of my Poison Wind Globadiers, but it's important to keep in mind that Poison Wind Globadiers do have 100 armor. So despite their pitiful melee stats, they can hold their ground and kind of hold up reasonably well. With the Clarinet Spears and Stormvermin here, these skeletons should not really be capable of killing these crews. So you can see here the Stormvermin are not quite able to stop the Nekar and Horsemen from getting on top of the gun crews, and now with 2 units of them on there, they'll probably be able to massacre the poor Skaven slaves to a man. Nonetheless, the Stormvermin with halberds are kind of slowly but surely chipping away at these guys. My opponent does pull away these skeleton horsemen on top of the cannon, so the cannon is being swarmed by 4 units of cavalry at the moment, but that does mean the artillery piece over here is not being swarmed. The artillery pieces have already done their job as well. It's not really as necessary at this point, because I have nuke down my opponent's lords and the big units. Over here, the assassin is kind of breaking. You can see the Tomb Guard are getting barraged slowly but surely by those Poison Wind Globes, but the Poison Wind Globes aren't really oriented against infantry. They'll do okay because they're armor piercing, but definitely nothing special. And you can see that volley doesn't do very much. Here, the Tomb Guard is kind of collapsing onto my assassin. The assassin is routing. Skrulk, of course, just beasting through all of these skeleton archers, tearing them to shreds. The Plague Monks here having very bad engage against the Tomb Guards, though they are slowly but surely chipping away at them, and they'll probably break them eventually. Unfortunately, with the fear, the Clarinet summons are definitely kind of falling apart and routing. And Skrulk is still very healthy, so he'll be able to stick around for a while. Over here, the cavalry does wipe out my cannon crew, which really sucks, but skeleton horsemen do get wiped out to a man, so 4 units of cavalry down the drain to take out 1 high veterancy cannon. To be fair, the cannon was high veterancy, so it was almost an even points trade. You can see over here, Shopti Summon does go down on my Poison Wind Globadiers, causing some damage. The Shopti are definitely tearing through them, but my cannon will be able to melt them down pretty quickly before they are able to do too much to my remaining troops. Over in the pits, Lord Skrulk slugging out with the Tomb Guard with halberds. One of my opponent's big problems right now is that he no longer has that cavalry, so if my opponent's rout, his troops are simply not fast enough to chase down my troops, to chase down any of my routing units. He can whittle them down with archers, of course, but definitely can't. For example, if Skrulk is forced to rout right here, he will simply be able to escape all the Tomb Guard and whatnot. You can see I do pop a stand your ground as well as blessed with filth, just trying to make Skrulk a little tankier, a little more survivable. He is, of course, applying a leadership debuff, which I do believe does affect the Tomb Guard, and of course he does have a melee attack debuff and an AoE around him. Over here, the Plague Monks are finally chipping away at the Tomb Guard, routing him off. Well, not routing them off, but crumbling them and making them fall apart, though the Nekar warriors will definitely shred through them. It's important to keep in mind that I also do have these 2 units of Stormvermin with halberds. While these guys are definitely not great infantry against great anti-infantry units, they can tie down troops. They're very tanky. They have very high armor at 90, at least relative to the armor-piercing values of most of these Tomb King troops. My opponent is basically has run out of all of his armor-piercing troops. So at this point, he's relying on his Nekar warriors, and they will simply struggle against the Stormvermin, especially when they're backed by Skrulk and his spell selection. Skrulk is kind of melting that Tomb Guard over here. You can see it's still taking a while because these guys do have very high melee stats in comparison to the trashy stats of my units. I do cast another spell here. I bless with filth just to try to whittle down these Nekar warriors a little quicker. Skrulk is about to finish off these Tomb Guard, and my opponent's army is definitely kind of in the pits. And with that, my opponent does decide to end the game. So Now, this was about as bad of a build for me to go up against as possible. The only thing that could have made this worse is if my opponent had dropped the Tomb Guard and brought vanilla Tomb Guard instead. But that is an incredibly risky move because, of course, if you invest so much, if you brought vanilla Tomb Guard, you don't really have an answer to Skaven large. And Skaven can, of course, bring Doom Wheels, which, while the Fear and Terror won't affect you, they can still rampage through your backline, cause immense amounts of damage. Your opponent could bring Rat Ogres, which would just shred through your infantry. So the Skaven definitely have a lot of options in the large selection, in the large roster, that you really need to have some sort of counter to. So you really don't have much of a choice besides bringing some sort of anti-large. Perhaps cramming in a few extra skeleton spears and dropping the Tomb Guard in favor of those would have been a decent choice. Not entirely sure. Nonetheless, the cannons were immensely useful. You can see, granted, they obviously didn't gain chevrons because they came in max veterancy. They didn't get many kills, but they nuked down High Queen Khalida, killed her very quickly. They killed the Lich Priest of Netkara, and that essentially crippled my opponent's army from the get-go. Had my opponent brought a tankier build with, say, or not a necessarily tankier build, but a more monster-heavy build, he would have been in an even worse position because he would have had to cross all of that open ground through the withering fire of 2 Warp Lightning Cannons that were max veterancy, hitting him. If it was, for example, a Necrosphinx, they would probably be hitting with just about every shot and slowly but surely annihilating him. And if he did get into melee, his trouble still wouldn't be over because, of course, the Stormroom and Halberds would be there ready to shut him down. In general, I do think this build is pretty decent. You get a good amount of anti-large with all the Clanrat Spears, with the Stormroom Halberds, with the cannons, with the Poison Wind Globadiers. The Poison Wind Globadiers are a little iffy, I think, but I do think they add an extra layer of anti-large defense that is really important against Tomb Kings. The Plague Monks are very useful at just shredding through the enemy infantry. If your opponent goes for a more, I would say, normal build for the Tomb Kings, and I don't necessarily think this is a non-competitive build, but if your opponent goes for a bit of more standard build as the Tomb Kings, then you will definitely need get much better value, I think, out of the Plague Monks than I got here. Because here, this is about as bad of a matchup as they could get. The Assassin, kind of useful. Once again, this is another bit of an iffy pick. I think the Assassin and the Poison Globadiers are the two iffies. The Assassin does provide a bunch of debuffs, and had my opponent gone with much larger units, bigger beasties, it would have perhaps been a little more useful. But as it was, he was just kind of a support tool. I would have been better off with a caster. So definitely a little bit of iffy. Skrulk, of course, beastly as always. As far as my opponent's build, as mentioned before, there's not really too much I think you could change to make it more competitive. Perhaps slightly more, 1 or 2 more mobile anti-large options, just because Skaven do have some nasty large units that could kind of just plow through your Tomb Guard, ignore them, and run amok in your backline. But as your archers don't really rout, it's not as much of a problem because for a lot of other factions, you get run over and your backline will rout off. But here, the Skeleton Archers, they'll stick around to the last, so it's less of a problem. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent. Definitely was a lot of fun. Definitely made it a tough one. So great game to Big Pimp Machine here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any insights of your own as to how to deal with the cannons, the Tomb Kings, be sure to post them down in the comments. Personally, I think the only what my opponent should have done is thrown his Skeleton Horsemen in before pulling his Lords and Heroes into the range of the cannons. I think that was definitely a little bit of a rough spot there in this. In coordinating his attack, but nonetheless definitely a little rough there of a matchup. So I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.